some paper. So thank you very much for coming back and agree to present your most recent paper. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Johan. So I'm very pleased to be here. This is the second time I came in this building, so I am always very pleased to meet this young team, so to see all of you and then all the people far from here. So today I will present a paper, and this will not be so easy for me, because for the first time I will speak about Viet Nam, not about nutrition, but about important issues. Nutrition is an important issue, but important issue. So this is a paper I wrote with Thanh and my colleague in Ho Chi Minh City from Han. And this paper is one more paper on the impact of FDI on productivity. One more paper. But here, what we want to do is to see if the institutional quality of provinces in Viet Nam favor or not the impact of FDI on productivity. And what is new in this paper is that I will use a framework, methodological framework, not often used for studying productivity in Vietnam, also not often used in the literature. And I will explain to you why. And do not think that the reason is that this technique is very complicated. I'm used to say techniques are not complicated, so we don't sometimes they are complicated, but I say no. But and then I encourage you to use that kind of techniques, even using very complicated models of productivity here. But there will be a small sentence in my slide about that. This is some kind of polemic. Okay, so what? I'm not this one.
You have to point in here.
You say next slide.
Okay.
So you can go quickly to the next slide. Okay. So you know that Vietnam is a leading destination for foreign direct investment. Why? Because Vietnam has competitive advantage. An open investment environment, low-cost labor, abundant natural resources, a large and young consumer market, for example, a lot of young people. Socio-political stability. You know me, I'm coming from a country with no political stability, actually. And this is a nightmare. So, and rich preferential policies on investment. You have to know that Vietnam belongs to the top 20 countries with the largest FDI inflows in the world. And Vietnam also ranks first in terms of FDI inflow among Southeast Asian countries, far behind Singapore. The amount of inflows is very large, but very close to Indonesia. I was surprised by that. And this is what I said by joking at the beginning of my speech, is that you have numerous works have documented the critical role played by FDI in Vietnam technological advancement and economic development. So you have a list of paper. When the paper will be ready, you will have. And there is a very recent paper by Nguyen, which is very interesting about this literature. Thank you. Okay. Yes. I am quite excited by that. So this is only to illustrate my speech today. Is the evolution of FDI net inflows. The net, you have to imagine that the FDI going outside. Around a period from 2005 up to, I think, 2023, you see that you have the crisis, banking crisis here. Here you have the COVID, but you see that you have a positive trend, and inflows of FDI in Vietnam are increasing over the period. Here you have, I think, when Viet Nam entered in WTO. Sorry. Okay. So, sorry for that slide. There is a lot of information. What I did here is to give to you a list of challenges encountered by Vietnam when Vietnam is facing FDI. So this is very well summarized in the paper of Fee and Hall in 2024. And you will see that there is a lot of work, very important work. When you want to assess, the impact of FDI, you have to consider a lot of dimensions. The first dimension is very important, is competition. I don't know if I put competition on that side. What is the meaning of competition? It's that when you have a company getting FDI money, maybe this company will compete with others. And so maybe, thanks to FDI, this company will have some advantages with respect to domestic. And so FDI can be detrimental if you do not have some managing of competition in the country you consider. And this is quite important. Then, I put this finding underscores the importance of policy that prioritizes high-tech and environmentally sustainable investment while fostering stronger linkage between FDI enterprise and domestic firms. So what is important here is also for the country who face to FDI to have the capability to absorb the technology. Not to copy the technology, but to absorb the technology. Think to China. China now is producing thanks to Airbus. Okay. So they were able to take the technology and to absorb the technology. But in order to do that, you must have, a good environment in terms of education. That is, you must have people in the country able to understand new technology. You must have good engineers, in fact. I discussed about FDI with some people, and then I said, look to the experience of France. In France, we have this school where we are producing very good engineers. Okay. And so we have a capability to innovate. And this is what is important, So we have a lot of words here. Here you have a criticism of a kind of approach whose, I'm not the responsible of this criticism, but it's very interesting to provide, to try to have startups, But you must also take a way, to give incentive for more innovation, more investment in R&D, more improved institutional coordination to achieve sustainable growth and technical progress. And we see that in this paper, Thanh, from Nguyen and me, we have a result about technical progress, and this result is surprising. So you have the right to question that result. Me, I will not defend and say what I have done is the best thing we can do. No. But this is what the data show. So the research question here is we have the first paper with Thanh. I hope this paper will be published soon, where we investigate the issue of the impact of FDI and PCI on efficiency of provinces. We use a parametric approach in this paper, and we found some interesting. So thanks to, for the first time in my life, I have a course that proposed me the econometric method. First time in my life. I was very happy about that. Okay, and we were able to treat about some big issue when you're estimating a production function using parametric method is endogeneity of input. And so thanks stand for that. But here, what we want to do is to do something similar, but using different techniques. And the novelty is to see if the quality of provincial institution has a moderating impact on the impact of FDI. The idea is, maybe you have the idea that you can do an hypothesis, but the best are the institution, the better is the impact of FDI. You will see what the data are saying to us. So, this paper is at the crossroad between two literature. A literature investigating the link between firm performances and FDI. So you have many papers. You have a very good survey in this paper of Nguyen and Ngoc in 2024. And also the literature investigating the link between firm performances and institutional quality. And on that issue, for Vietnam, you have only two papers. And you have two papers by the same author in 2024. They use small and medium enterprise survey to draw some insight about the impact of FDI. So they investigate the role of local institutional quality in influencing FDI spillover in Vietnam. And they find that higher quality institutions enhance small and medium enterprise capacity to leverage the benefit of FDI. A very interesting result. But they have a second result. And the second result is, I think, this big question is the fact that when you focus on R&D investment in Vietnam, then they highlight that FDI can negatively affect domestic innovation due to competition, the competition effect, and due to limited absorptive capacity. So competition is that when you have a firm with FDI adopting technology, they can push out from the market domestic firm. And absorptive capacity is the capacity to be able to reproduce, the innovation linked to FDI. That's okay with that? Okay. So this is this took me a lot of time, and to come to, of course, I'm not familiar with this literature. You know me, I am an economist, I like a lot of econometrics. But then this is, I think, one of the first time I had to a very important issue to treat. So econometrics is important, but it's important to make data reveal something about what is happening with them. Not to force the data to reveal something. To reveal. And so we have here a strategy and estimating strategy. So we are using data on Vietnamese provinces. This is very different from what is done in the classical literature, where most of the people they use firm data. And when Thanh and me, we are splitting our paper, the first remark is, why you are not using firm data? So there is a trade-off. Aggregate data with their robots. Firm data, the only time I use firm data in Vietnam, I use a GSO survey of firms in Vietnam. I put to the garbage the third of the data. So can I consider that this is representative of firms in Vietnam? I don't know. With provinces, the drawback is that we have aggregate data at the level of a province. So you can criticize the way the GRDP is computed. You can criticize a lot of things, but this is the data we have in our head. If we were able to have better data, we will be very happy. And so here we will use data collected by Thanh on FDI, and we will use PCI as an indicator of institutional quality. And so there is I quote this paper, because this paper is on Indonesia, but they use provincial data and they have a way to measure the competition effect, the absorptive effect, things like that. And this paper is not published in a very top journal, it's published in a journal, but this is very interesting to me, this paper. And so, you know what I like about non-parametric method. In this paper, we will use the framework of advanced, robust, and non-parametric methods in efficiency analysis. So there was a very good book in 2007 with this important man. You have to imagine that I met this man in 1990. I never have published a paper. For me, it's shameful. I am not a woman, I am not Italian. Okay. But what is quite funny is that the second time I came to Viet Nam, I participated to school in applied mathematics, and I was in charge to teaching efficiency analysis, and I really used that. So, and we will use something more recent, what is called conditional non-parametric frontier analysis. And you have a very good paper of author of mine, Camilla Mastromarco, and the famous Leopold Simard in 2015. This paper, they use FDI. This is not a complicated paper, but this is not a very well written paper. You know, this woman is interested by two things in her life: eating a lot and doing and coding. But when you ask her to explain what she's doing, you must encounter a problem. And when you are eating, you know, at the table with her, you must make it. If you want to have something, so sorry, so you know this is by default. So, but here, so we will do something similar. We will use FDI and PCI as environmental factor. So what they did, Camilla and Leopold, is to introduce in non-parametric frontier analysis variable in order to explain the efficiency measure. And they say we will say that these are environmental factors because these factors will be factors describing the environment in which the firm is taking its decision. Okay? These factors are not under the control of the firm. But these factors are explaining the choice made by the firm. This is really important. Okay. Why I insisted a lot on that? So you are young here. Maybe you have seen papers, these papers by Ole and Bates. You have to imagine that I saw a presentation of this paper in my life by Bates a long time ago in a conference in Toulouse, where you have the best people in structural econometrics in the world. And this paper is very interesting. Now you can implement that, or it takes Levinson, Between, Woodridge. You have all what you need in Stata to do that. Okay, you see that I'm looking for pictures in Stata. You can do that quite easily. So a lot of people are doing that. And then they adopt a two-stage approach. What is a two-stage approach? It's an approach where first you estimate efficiency, then you have an efficiency score, you have a measure for each province, describing how efficient the province is in using input in order to produce output. And then in the second step, you regress the efficiency score on a given set of explanatory values. That is, in the first step, you are doing as if what you use as a determinant of efficiency in the second step, you do not use this information. So there is something wrong in what you are doing. The first to make this remark were Wilson and Simard about the non-parametric approach. But the same criticism to the non-parametric approach applied to the parametric approach. And you know why you see that I'm ready to fight here. You know why? Because Thanh and me, when we are submitting our papers, every time we are people saying, why you do not implement Olympics? Me, I'm ready to implement Olympics. I have the solution, not to do the step. But in order to do that, you must read. You know, you are a young researcher. You are interested in my research, or you are doing. Do not hesitate to read. Read. Find this information. Okay? And so, the drawback of the two-step change approach is the separability assumption, to separate things. And here to suppose that environmental factors at firms, that the production decision of the firms are independent of the environment in which these decisions are taken. Okay? So you see, so we have to find some things. So we're going one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. You arrived for the most interesting one. So I will give to you a small, a brief story of conditional non-parametric. If I am speaking a lot, so this literature is literature tracing back to a paper by Farrell in 1957, a long time ago. So the first time I worked on that was in the beginning of the 90s by reading the book of Prof, Shona Goldstone, and Ngoc. A long time ago. This is an interesting book. And maybe you have heard that words. But the estimator proposed in this literature are known as data envelopment analysis. So you imagine you have production data, you have a set of production data, you want to envelope this data. That is for each observation, for each given X, you try to find the maximum value of Y. Okay. Or for the reverse, for given value of Y, you try to find the minimum value of X. Okay. So, and to do that, this is very easy to do. You use linear programming. Okay. This was a nightmare for Thanh when he saw what I code. Because he was not familiar with the way of coding that in R, but now I know that it's not very good. So, analysis of efficiency determinant. At the same time, you know, people try to see that because to measure efficiency is interesting when you want to benchmark firm, to compare firm among them. Okay. And this is quite natural because when you are computing, you know, this part of the frontier, you are comparing fields that are comparable. Okay. And so you can do benchmarking. But what is interesting is to go further, is in fact to explain. So the idea, and I remember one of my colleagues in econometrics, older than me, said, Michel, implement a two-stage method. It was at the beginning of the 90s. Remember? So to implement your data, you implement DEA, data envelopment analysis, and then you're doing linear regression. But when you are measuring things like that, you see that when you increase the output for a given value of the input, you multiply by something greater than 1. If you have 1, the value 1 is that you are in the frontier. Okay? And if you are this part of the frontier, you must multiply by something greater than 1. So there is a threshold to your efficiency measure. And surprisingly, they use Tobit. But Tobit has nothing to do with truncated data. Tobit is when you do not observe a variable, you have a truncated, but you have a reason, you know why. Here, you do not have any process, any economic process, so everything was false. But in fact, And this is the reason why I like a lot what Leopold is doing. He said that when you are doing econometrics, you must always think about the data generating process. How can you imagine your data have been generated? So you are using a linear regression, you are using DEA, so you have a frontier, and then the move to the frontier can be explained by some determinants. Why you are not doing this? The two at the same time. This was the idea developed in what is called the two-stage semi-parametric approach proposed by Simioni and Wilson in 2007. Very important, you can implement that with stat. Okay. The main limitation of that is that you assume that the efficiency is generated by a truncated linear specification. Okay. But you can do something. I wrote a paper recently with Nguyen. I hope this paper will be published somewhere. I hope this paper will not have a referee. Okay, so and then the literature continued, and you see always the same name. And here, what is interesting is that Leopold Simard, with two colleagues of mine in Toulouse, proposed a probabilistic framework to the statistical modeling of production funds. Their aim was not to introduce an environmental factor at that time, but the objective was simply that imagine you want to build a frontier, the data here, and then you have a province here, Cochin City. Then your frontier will be this, and then this. So you have an outlier. Okay? So you want to have robust estimator. So you want estimator not sensitive to the fact that you can have outlier in your data. So we develop an approach. And what the Simard did with Cinza Dariao is to introduce the presence of environmental factor by estimating conditional efficiency score. And then you have a lot of theoretical paper, always with the same author, Leopold Simard, and a set of co-authors. I know most of them, so especially for me. Okay, but you do not have a lot of applied paper. And the main reason why you do not have a lot of paper, so you have paper by Mastromarco, Simard, Depocen 3 years ago, you have an interesting paper if you are interested in hospitals, how to evaluate conditional efficiency for hospitals, depending on factors in the environment of hospitals. You have a very interesting paper of Polymis and CLMS on the evaluation of the impact of antitrust regulation. Very interesting paper. And why people are not using that? And why I didn't use that during 15 years? Why? Because I have a code. The main issue with Leopold is that he's writing code, not in MATLAB. So if you are not a specialist of MATLAB, and if you have no money to pay by MATLAB, you are lost. No available code in standard. So if some of you are interested in coding, you have a market. There is this code, some package in R. At the beginning, we were thinking to use a RCDEA package written by Anna Body. Don't use that package. There is a lot of that. And then, but this is not the paper. Last step is a very recent paper by Mastromarco, Simard, and a new author, but it's not a new author, Ingrid van Keledon in 2025. And I'm very interested in implementing the approach here, because this is a new way to estimate what they did many years ago. But now, by computing conditional productive efficiency, but we evaluate the managerial efficiency. So you see that in the situation of Viet Nam actually, this may be interesting to use all data in the 63 provinces to see what is the quality of the management. So what are the quality? what were the quality of managers in these provinces. Okay, let me turn back to the paper. So for maths, but you will see that these maths are very simple for. Okay, so when you are doing non-parametric approach in production analysis, you begin by a beautiful things. You define what is the production set. So the production set is a set of all the vector of input and output, such that when you are using this vector of input, you can produce this quantity of output. Okay. But the main things Casal and Al have done is to show that formalizing that is equivalent to formalize the production set by using a probability. And this probability is a strange probability, is this probability. So for the couple X and Y, this probability must be positive. So what is this probability? This probability is simply the probability for the random variable generating input to be smaller than the quantity X. And for the output to be larger than the quantity Y. What is the meaning of that? You say this is very complicated. Imagine that you have data. You observe that. Okay. Then you are interested in evaluating this point. 12 for the input, producing 4 for the output. You see that this observation is dominated by observation. Okay. So when you are writing the probability, this strange probability, what you are saying is that the probability of the observation to be dominated is positive. And imagine that we move that like that, up to the frontier. Then the probability is equal to 0. Okay. This was a very good idea. Okay. And so the production set will be this, and then you describe by using for each observation the fact if the observation dominated or not. Okay. So I have to do that, yes. So what is an output-oriented technical efficiency? If I am thinking of an output, what I will do, I will fix the quantity of input, and then I will look by which factor I can multiply the output in order to go to the frontier. Okay, so if I come back to the formula, I will compute this value theta such that this value theta is the larger value of theta we can get by multiplying y0 and to stay in the production set. This is equivalent to say that this function has to be positive. In this function, in fact, we are taking only the part where we are taking the conditional probability of having y greater than y, given that x is smaller than x. And we multiply by the density of x. Okay. But not the density, the cumulative density function of x. Okay. And so the efficiency can take the value of 1 when the province is efficient, greater than 1 if the province is inefficient. So now, what is the issue? The issue is to compute that. But you hear about a very large literature in non-parametric econometrics when you can do, well, why you can do. Okay. Now, you want to introduce environmental factor. So the modification is at the margin. You see that here I introduce environmental factors. Say here is the random variable belonging to a given in R to a given power, say FDI and PCI. What we will do, we will consider the probability of observing X and Y, and not exactly the probability of observing X. The same probability I defined a few minutes ago, but now conditional to Z. So conditional to the environment in which the firm is active, or the province is active. Okay? And we add, simply that. And we can define conditional measure by using conditional probability. Okay. Very simple. So now, what is the important issue is to estimate this probability. But you will see that I will not spend a lot of time. And what is important for me, what I want you to understand is that here I draw the same firm, and I say, I did that, for the example. So I will take all the firms active in the same production environment, where so far with the same value, small z. So the frontier will be there. The conditional frontier will be there. As we are using less data, the frontier will be at the interior, and the production set will be at the interior of the production shed, where you do not condition. So, if you want to assess the impact of environmental factor, so we have a paper by Badin et al., including Sima and Masro Sima. The way to assess the impact is to see how the measure of efficiency, conditional efficiency, is evolving with respect to the unconditional as a function of Z. So imagine that we have a Z such that when we increase Z, we are going like that. So we are going to the unconditional frontier, meaning that Z has a positive impact, okay, on the frontier. Okay? And so, if this quantity is an increasing function of Z, we have a favorable effect on the production frontier. And so, FDI maybe will be a freely available input. Then, if you have something decreasing, this is an unfavorable effect on the production frontier. And so now the external factor acts now as an unavoidable output. Okay, it penalizes the production of output of units. Okay. So this is what we want to measure. Imagine we will put some input for the provinces here, and output for the provinces, FDI and PCI here, as external factor. I do not think that you are using it. And so now, how to do that? This is a cooking part. It's the recipes. Without a lot of formulas, I have recipes. It's easy to implement the EA. Okay? So we will implement the EA for unconditional production set. So we will use all the data. For conditional, you see that I put a probability. So you can imagine that what is interesting is to estimate the probability. Okay. But to estimate the probability, we will not use exactly the provinces acting with the same Z. We will have a look because we need to have enough data to make an estimator. You can imagine that if you take a provinces with a given value of FDI and a given value of PCI, the probability to have a similar province is close to 0. So we will use what is a notion in non-parametric econometrics. That is, when you want to estimate something in a given point, you are looking at similar value around this point. Okay? And so this is where this technique may look complicated because you have to define the neighborhood of the province but it's provinces that are not far from the province of interest in terms of PCI and FDI. Okay, and so we have a bandwidth choice. And the main limitation I encountered in my life in coding, this is easy to code, really in R. But the main issue I had was to code the search of this optimal bandwidth. Very complicated. Then what we did is that we do not exactly implement DEA over all the observation. We implement a robust version to have estimator robust to the presence of outlier. That is, we do not want to have always oceanicity in the comparison. Okay, it's not exactly that reason. I will move to oceanicity next week. Maybe we also police will say no, we will go to oceanicity. No, but and so we will use what is called order M estimator. So order M estimator, the idea is very simple. Instead of using all the observation, you will use a subsample. So you have to define M. And then instead of using only one sample with M observation, you will reproduce that a lot of times, and you will take the average efficiency level you are getting after all that. So you see that the issue when you are doing that, let me come back to oceanicity, is that oceanicity is there. So you will take 10 observations. Most of the time, they will be there. So oceanin is so high that the value of the efficiency measure will be greater than 1. So we will have a set of super efficient provinces. And the objective is to find the value of n such that the percentage of super efficient observation is as small as possible. And most of the time, the number of super efficient is only like that. And then you have a kind of, it go to 0, but it's going to 0, but slowly. And then you choose, when you have this, I do not remember the word in English, sorry. Okay. So we choose 200 provinces in our annual. And then we get estimate of this unconditional measure. We get estimate of this conditional measure. We will implement non-parametric regression. If you want to do things with data, this is easy to do with data. And then, what was important in my life? This is something very strange. I was a researcher at INRAE. I entered at INRAE in 1986, 40 years. And during 12 years of my career, I was evaluating researcher in my department. And I evaluate this young man, Simioni. So he's a colleague of mine. I never met him, but I know perfectly what he's doing. And thanks to a paper he published in 2023, I have the code. So I have only to modify the code. That's not really my life. You see, it was so this is what we have done in the paper. So let me turn now to the empirical. Yes.
So the red line is the data.
It's not the data function. This is the frontier. The theta, in fact, is that the measure to the distance from the frontier from the observation to the frontier, by which amount you have to multiply 4 here to go to the frontier. And the unconditional is this. This is the reason that that over that is smaller than 1. And you will see, I know that you were my students always, I know that. You will see that due to the fact that I am using robust estimator, I will have value of ratio greater than 1.
Actually, it's a ratio of slope.
Yeah.
The one factor of this thing.
But then you have to imagine that the estimator will be shook choop, choop, and then choop, because we are using the EA. So these are the data collected by Viet Nam about provinces in Vietnam. So we will use as output the gross regional domestic product. As input, we will use a measure of labor forces defined in thousands of persons. We have a capital stock, so at the level of the province. So in fact, we do not have the capital stock, the province in official data. But I am involved in production econometrics since more than 30 years.
So we only have investment.
So when you have investment, do not hesitate to read a small book written by people from OECD about how to compute capital stock using that kind of data. This is what we did in 2018 when I met Thanh. And then we have PCI and FDI. So maybe you use, what is interesting, here, this is due to the fact I am teaching a lot of panel data. You have to stop to teach panel data because it's a nightmare for me. I put here the between as a standard deviation because it's quite interesting to see that for FDI, the between is larger to the reason, meaning that the difference are coming from provinces, not what is happening during time. And here, this is quite comparable. And this is the reason why I draw this figure. Maybe you know that I like a lot of kind of figure. Where I put here the distribution. So here you have all the provinces. Here you have the PCI. Maybe you see that there is a trend. But you see that most of the time, the distribution are comparable. Okay. So there is not a large variability in PCI. But if you look to FDI, you see that you can put a threshold here, where in many provinces, 0. The value of FDI is 0. Okay. And then you have cumulatively, I have difficulty to read, sorry. Nguyen, you are, yeah, the first one. With the larger amount in from this curve. There was a larger amount of FDI. So this is important. Someone who is not here today asked a question about, do you have a way to say something about measure? About measure, the measuring of profits. I will say no. I have no figures to produce. I hope that my next paper, but my next paper is not far to be ready. I will say something about that. But I will need the help of my co-author because they know better Viet Nam than me. And my philosophy is you take a monster, you take a second monster, you put a third monster. You imagine size? Super. You have a super monster. This is not a criticism of what is happening in Michel for Simioni City, in Vietnam, or in Nguyen. It's only that they have a very, I think, very dynamic policy for investment in that part of Vietnam. Due to the fact that they have very good infrastructure. They have the river, and this is very important, But I will come back to that issue at the end of the speech. So efficiency score, yes?
Is there a problem if the order of pizza index on the learning objective?
Yeah.
Because the first one in there is no questions.
Yes, for Simioni somewhere.
So, 7th?
Yeah. I said. So sorry, because these are algorithm. But you know, I will turn back to your question in few minutes. Because you know, in French, we are used to say that this is, how do you say, sorry? This is, you know, the fruit you put on the cake. Here, I rank with respect to PCI, with respect to FDI, with respect to the different measures of efficiency, I rank all the provinces. So, the last one, the top 10. So you see that Ho Chi Minh City is at the, so you have to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 one. This one, 8. In this, with respect to PCI, and first with respect to. Okay. Well, I will come back to Randolph first. So, I will not spend a lot of time on this figure. So here, you have what you can do. Easily, in an easy way. What you can do. So you see that I put a bound here to 1. And here you have efficiency measure. Okay? And so, the closest you are to 1, the better you are. Chine City, Mutao, maybe in zone, you see they are there. And then you have this poor province far from being efficient. But when compared to the entire set of provinces, including the big ones, the stronger ones, okay? Here, you have the same, but here, instead of using all the observation, we use samples of 200 observation, we compute the efficiency measure, and at the end, we compute the average value. Okay? You see that here now, you have super efficient. Yes. But we stop here because these numbers stay quite stable when we have 200 observation. And you find Zonto, Ho Chi Minh City, Binh always in that part of the ranking. And here, some provinces. And you see that what is important is that the level, the largest value is smaller to what you are getting when you are not taking a robust estimator. Okay? Then I put other figures, so sometimes they are not so easy to interpret. Because here, when you have, so you see that when you have conditional efficiency score, you have to imagine that you get this score by comparing each province to a set of provinces that are similar to the province. Okay? But even by doing that, you see that when we are comparing Ho Chi Minh City, Binh Duong, and this province here, there are not a lot of provinces with which we are comparing. So they are always efficient. Okay. But what is interesting is then to beat the ratio. And you see that when you are looking, so the bound is 1. You see that most of the provinces, they have a ratio smaller than 1. Saying that maybe there is a way to improve FDI, PCI, to improve the efficiency of these provinces. Okay. And then you have provinces always with value larger than the ratio is larger than 1. And always the same. Mutao, Chine City, Viet Nam, Binh Duong. You have all this. So if you are selling back to the government, the price is very high. No, I'm joking.
Too late to
Now it's too late. But what is interesting is to assess the impact of FDI in this year. So what is interesting, you know, Nguyen, with what we have done, is that this can be reproduced to other cities. if you have a number of firms, you can do the same. And then you can do a kind of benchmarking. And I will speak about benchmarking in a few minutes. So what is interesting is that we are using a non-parametric estimator when we are averaging the ratio of conditional over unconditional efficiency as a function of Z. We have panel data. So to take into account that we have panel data and that we have production data. So we can expect that there is some external technological change in our data. We put time as one of the factors explaining the efficiency. You can do that with this approach. If you want to use the two-stage approach, the semi-parametric two-stage approach proposed by Leopold Sima and Wilson, and you have the coordinates data, no way to do time. No way. And so, if you have a referee like me, I will kill you people with fundamental. Okay. So, and when you are doing non-parametric fields, my friend Jeffrey Racine provided test to see if which factor has a significant impact on the ratio or not. And so the first result I got when I estimated using the data, so the data, is something important. Is that here is not, the impact is not significantly different. FDI and PCI, they have a positive, they have an impact. Okay. I put the p-value here because only the statistics. So the meaning of that is that after having jointly controlled for FDI and PCI, we see no exogenous improvement in the technology used by dynamics over the period of investigation.
So say.
That's so sad, that's true.
When I got that result, I said, I had to present that in front of the analyst researcher. Because this meaning is that you do not have innovation. This is so sad, yes. This is the reason, you know, I'm not comfortable in presenting that to him. You have to stop it. You know. I'm not so comfortable, but because. So, but Mia was very interesting because I do not have to focus on 3 variables, I have to focus on only 2 variables. But the first result is this result. Then you can always say, yes, Michel, but you are only taking these 2 factors. Maybe if you have some indicators about the quality of the infrastructure, and I think this is really important, maybe you can observe something, you know, maybe, I don't know. But the main limitation, you know, of non-parametric techniques is that the less explanatory factors you have, the better you are. Because then you need to have a predicts. Then I did this figure. Maybe I will have changed this figure in the paper. And so I assess the impact of FDI on efficiency score as a function of PCI when I am considering the estimation of the frontier, the production frontier. That is when I am considering a robust estimator of the frontier. So here I have the ratio between 0 and 1, sometimes greater than 1. And here I have FDI. And so, for example, this function describes the impact of FDI for the province with the better score for PCI. And what you see is that when you are taking a given value of PCI, you have the best one of FDI, you have the best one in terms of PCI, then the 90% quantile, then the 75% quantile, and so forth. Okay? So, you see that you have a favorable positive impact of FDI. That's interesting. So, if you have FDI, it's moving to frontier in the right way. But if you focus only event value of FDI on PCI, you have an unfavorable impact. I put negative, so okay. So this is too a strange result to find an explanation. And so FDI played a significant role in accelerating technological change. Have you, in your life, listened to the word of crowding effect? Here you have typically a crowding effect. That is, FDI, in terms of technical change in Viet Nam, is taking the place in innovation. But this role is slowing down by PCI. This is something we also. Then I did the same because people are used to do that in the literature, and this is interesting. Here I consider the same figure, but by taking only one observation. So here I have a lot of super efficient value, but by taking one observation, I am comparing each film to a large number of other films. Individual comparison. So I have a kind of average production function. And so what I am interested in here is the moving of efficiency and the average efficiency. I cannot say things about the quantile. So here I am interested in the way the efficiency is moving to the frontier. Okay? And so what is called technological catch-up. And here you have a positive impact of FDI and a positive impact of PCI. Okay. So PCI doesn't act really on the frontier, but act on the capacity of police to move to the frontier. Okay. So FDI acts as an extra input, and its impact is favored by a better quality of provincial institution. And so for policymakers, I give this table in the paper. So I have to change the order. I have to put the first one here, because the first is the last one. Okay. And so here you have all the provinces. Maybe I have to change the name of the provinces to put the real name. And in blue, you have provinces belonging in the top 10 for PCI. In red, you have the top 10 for FDI. And in orange, you have the firms that are in the top 10 at the same time for PCI and FDI. Okay. So you see that sometimes you can be in the top 10, but be ranked not as very good provinces in terms of efficiency. And then we can continue. Here you have the middle. And then here, what is interesting is that you have the province. So here you have the top 10 for PCI. The best one is Da Nang. I took the average value, possibly I will go to in the distribution because we have 10 years. So Da Nang, the best for FDI, the province with the larger value of FDI is Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Bac Vinh, Binh Duong. And you see that you have some provinces that stay in this ranking of province. And what is interesting is here you have the most efficient province. hometown, Washington City, but and all things on can make it together. The name is only there. So you see, when you have the so you want me to let that for you to think about measuring. So we have the result. So we try to see if the results have been observed by others in the literature. And the crowding out effect has been made in evidence by Jude in 2019 for Central and Eastern European countries. And what is interesting with this paper is that she had data over a quite long period. And she showed that you have a negative impact at the beginning for FDI, and then you have a positive impact. But you need time to move at the transition from this to the. You have the same in a paper, very recent paper by Nguyen et al. In 2024, who show that FDI has a negative relationship with domestic innovation when considering panel data for 49 developed and developing countries, not including Viet Nam, unfortunately, over 14 years. This, so crowding out effect. This is PCI has a negative impact on technological change, is also negatively moderating the impact of FDI on technological change. These two effects disappearing completely for large amount of FDI. Surprising, yes. You have the whole paper by Michel saying that FDI can be seen as a source of technological externality that can be beneficial to domestic firms. But then you have a lot of conditions that must be satisfied if you want this effect to be observed. And to have this, you must have high absorptive capacity of domestic firms, high quality of regulation to fight against, the fact that some firms can take dominant position in a given sector. I do not say to use a name going through my mind because I am in Viet Nam. It's dangerous to quote some Vietnamese company and high property right protection. This is really okay. You know what? When I wrote that, I was thinking, to the international situation. So this is a parenthesis, and then I stop. You know what? We are moving from what? Where all that was important things for economists. Regulation. To have good laws about competitions. Now we are moving to the world of bandits. With tariffs, imposing tariffs to other countries. Very special. So, what about this condition in? It would be interesting to make a kind of descriptive analysis about all these conditions to see if that is kind of result we are getting here as a sense. And then I have a conjecture. Is that do we also capture the fact that the provinces with high PCI are also the ones where the capacity of domestic firms to innovate and the human capital capacity to absorb technology transfer are the strongest, without relying on the presence of maybe. But the main issue is that I cannot observe that. I cannot observe that. So this is a conjecture. With respect to the distribution of efficiency, the results are in line to the literature. So with what Michel was saying about the impact of the productivity spillovers, and you have a lot of paper insisting on productivity spillovers, and you have also the quality of provincial institution can facilitate the existence of these fields. Okay. And I think that Nguyen and Vo are saying something about that in the paper about small and medium. Then, next step. Maybe I'm too.
Why not be in 10?
So,
26, now 25. We change.
26. Oh, I'm joking. I'm too much.
We see you.
You know, this is from someone like me, it's very, very interesting what is happening with them. I began to work on Vietnamese province 5 years ago, 7 years ago, a few times. 2009. And so we published some papers on that issue. We had difficulty to publish other papers on that issue. And so I say, this is a sad story, what is happening in Vietnam for education. We will have a problem that the sample of provinces, the number of provinces is decreasing. So what can we do? But maybe there is a way to do an ex-ante assessment of merger. There are two ways. There is a way, Nguyen worked on that some years ago, because I said her that she can do some merger analysis about banks in Vietnam. Banks where the banking system was restructured in the beginning of the 2010, something like that, 2015. So it was interesting to, and you have Prof, Swedish,
CBS, I think he's looking at CBS.
and Prof proposed a way, you know, to see if merger are interesting or not. What is difficult to think is that, you know, in order to do that, you will take, for example, Ho Chi Minh City, Binh Duong, and Buntao. You will add the input, you will add the output, you will estimate the new frontier with this value, and then you will try to measure some effects. You have different effects to measure about the quality of the ex-ante quality of the merger. This is quite easy. If you have the data, you can do that. Very easy. You took the book, take the book of Prof, you read the part about that. It's quite easy. It took me some hours to do that in coffee in Ho Chi Minh City. When I explained that to Ngoc, she had a very good student. The student wrote a paper, but not the course of the paper, but everything was okay. But what is interesting for me is to go further. And at the end of last year, I read the paper by Master Marco, Sima, and Prof about managerial efficiency and economic efficiency. And I am currently writing the code. I am at the next step. The next step is quite difficult because I have to write 5 pages of computation by hand to be sure that what I was doing. Because they do not explain. They explain the formula for an input-oriented measure, but not for an output-oriented. So I have to. But it was quite funny to do that. But what is interesting here, the idea is very simple. You want to evaluate efficiency, economic efficiency. Here, in what I am doing, you see that there was a step where I have to compute bounds. On my computer, it took 5, 6. And you do not have a lot of data to do that because you are doing order n, so you are looking to a smaller number of observations. you are not in very good condition to do that. So I'm criticizing the paper I just presented to you. But the idea here is different, is to compute clean output and clean input. What is the meaning of that? Is in the input and the output to control for the part due to environmental factor, and then you have something due to other factors. And you will see that these other factors are the managerial, are the quality of the manager in that process. You do that for input, you do that for output. You take the residual of the estimation, and you do DEA with it. And I didn't put the result on that slide, but the result are very, very surprising. I presented only one time the result to Thanh. He said that he can trust in my result. I say that when I show you the result about managerial efficiency, the ranking of province was very strange. You found the, and I think it's interesting to go deeper in that. Okay. And then what I propose in this paper is to go from that to recover the productivity efficiency. What I have just studied here in the paper I just presented to you. You know, but this is I think something interesting, because then you will see if it is interesting to put chemicity within zone and put out. Because we have not a measure of productivity, but a measure of the quality of the management.
So we have another country,
Yeah.
a big country.
So this will be interesting. So if I am still alive and I will be retired, so I'm free for visiting position, you know. And I hope I will have time to present that to him to 2026. But you know, this was for talking. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention. It was a long presentation. So.
Thank you, Michel. Any questions from you guys? Bên trên online lại hỏi được. Ok. Có thể ai đọc tờ ban nghe được không?
In English.
Ai Tú? Thầy Tú.
It should be interesting to food.
To map.
For example, yeah.
Hi, Michel. How are you?
Food. How are you?
Yes, fine. Okay, I would have some question just to understand your paper. So I forget that what is the period of the study is
Because period of study 2010, 2000.
2019, yeah, before the COVID.
Before COVID.
Yeah.
okay, and so what is the measurement unit of your variable? Because I see one table where you put billion Viet Nam dong, but I don't know what is the measurement unit for production, for FDI, and so on.
So actually, we convert all the value to 1 year, 2010, and then the FDI is implemented FDI. So there are two kinds of FDI. So when you reach a statistics, you have a register, but not necessarily implemented. So we use implemented FDI.
Yeah. Okay. And it's not very clear to me the impact of FDI on technological change. In your paper, you have several different results, right? You have improving effect on mean efficiency. So for this, I think that is a positive impact on technological change, right? And all the things you have this impact is moderated by PCI. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think FDI and PCI, they are very correlated. Typically, in the PCI index, you have several components reflecting in FDI because, you know, for example, some tax exemption, some administrative burden, and so on. And I think that's very correlated to FDI. So I think in the very sample manner, maybe you should put an interaction term between two variables in your regression, or otherwise maybe there's some omitted factor that can affect FDI, PCI, and also productivity as well. So have you some ideas about that? Your modeling? Yeah, is your modeling include? Can your modeling include some indigeneity issue? I mean,
we can include indigeneity issue. But this is so first, my first comment is that it's not so evident that there is a correlation between FDI and PCI. Maybe your justification is right. I try to, you know, when I produce a table with the ranking of province, this is not, I do that because the first thing I would like to do was to have to compute rank correlation. And I was able to find high value for the rank correlation between FDI and PCI. And I was surprised by that. I was thinking that maybe there is something strange in that. So this is the first part of my answer. By using non-parametric tools and by using conditional expectation, I am taking directly into account that I have interaction between PCI and FDI. I cannot separate.
But I don't know. I don't know. PCI and FDI, you put them in, you know, in the parametric part, right?
They are not in a parametric. There is nothing parametric in what I have done. Nothing. Everything is non-parametric. Everything is based on the estimation of the probability H. Everything is based on that. And the estimation of this probability, we estimate the joint probability. We do not estimate in a separate way. In fact, we are estimating the conditional probability of observing a value of y greater than small y, given that we observe a value of x smaller than small x. Okay. We use non-parametric estimator of that quantity. There are nothing parametric in this. Nothing. You know, and this was the main criticism done by Simard and Wilson. When they proposed a semi-parametric approach, they say that if you want to do something serious, when assuming that efficiency is explained in a parametric way by environmental factor, then you must take that into account in the data generating process. And then you must have a way to do things taking account that you have that in your data generating process. And so we have, I did that because this is interesting, because you can directly, so sometimes the way I'm presenting the results is not so good, because I say the impact of FDI and what is happening when PCI is moving. In fact, we can do the reverse, you know, because we have the interaction. So, and but the interaction is naturally in the model. No parametric.
Okay.
And last, your question about endogeneity is very important. This is what is missing. I know a way to do that. but I'm missing the good expertise about Viet Nam. In order to find a good, you know, I can put a latent factor describing some kind of heterogeneity among provinces. But I have to find a kind of instrumental variable for this factor. And I try to think about this issue, but this is quite complicated. But there is a way to do something. And I recognize that this is missing in what I have done. And the paper is the paper about latent factor is a paper published, I think, 3-4 years ago. But the main issue is to raise the plot.
Yeah, I think that's very difficult to account for indigeneity. I just have another comment just to discuss with you about the correlation issue between PCI and FDI. I still believe that PCI, FDI are very correlated. And that is because there's some agglomeration effect between provinces. Look at some provinces in South Vietnam. You have Ho Chi Minh City, Bình Dương, Vũng Tàu, Đồng Nai, and Bình Phước, and so on. So they are very close. And also, if you look at the north, you have Hanoi, Bắc Ninh, Hải Phòng, something like that. And in the center as well, you have Da Nang, maybe around Da Nang. So there's some sort of a spatial correlation here. So I don't know if your approach can answer this kind of question.
For the moment, no. I do not. I think I can address this issue, but for the moment, no. This is you know what I did here is not a first step, but yes, it's a first step in thinking about the impact of FDI and PCI, the joint impact of FDI and PCI. So I have not a clear answer to your question.
Okay, so I think yeah, just something that's come in mind. Yes, you talk about technological change, and I mean here technical efficiency is something neutral, right? And so, do you have any intuition about bias technological change? Something, for example, you know, FDI may be something related to capital bias, technical change, or labor bias, technical change, something like that. So do you have any intuition about that?
You know, I am putting in, when doing the estimation, I am putting time as a factor. So everything I am doing is conditional. So it's a way, I think, I don't know how to put that in as non-parametric, to put, you know, bias, technical change, things like that, notion like that. But I think that as I'm doing things where everything is conditional to time.
But time is time may represent autonomous technological change.
Yeah.
Okay. But you cannot measure labor augmenting capital technological change or capital augmenting technological change.
But this will mean to define in another way our output and input. Here will be interesting, for example, to have a measure of human capital. Yeah. If I was able to have a measure of human capital, it would be very interesting because I need to say something about the absorptive capacity of firms. And I think that human capital is an important factor to explain that, you know. So, but I cannot go very far with only 63 provinces and 10 years.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Michel.
Thank you. Oh, have a nice day in Paris.
Any other questions?
Just small.
Yeah.
So your working implies that the FDI has a very most of the implemented technologies were changed from India. Which means when I think about the business comes to mind that there's no technological shocks, but mostly because of the internet. So most of the changes that there is this within this business cycle is like mostly by the employee control.
I don't know. Well, yeah, it's outside my knowledge. I'm so sorry. That's the thing.
I have small questions. Right?
I will sit.
Okay, you may see. The measurement of FDI come into the model twice, right? The measurement of FDI comes in your model twice, right? One through the FDI and the other is through the investment or capital stock.
When capital, we convert from investment, not FDI. FDI is just implemented.
Yeah,
Sure.
Then we have the static system. We already have the investment.
I know,
Yeah.
but that investment includes FDI. See? No?
I don't think so.
So what is it?
Just you the capital stock.
No, if you have capital stock,
maybe.
you convert the capital stock from the
No,
investment. So if it's not as they twice, so how do you account for the something called capital stock? You see what I mean? Right, so the capital should be in the model. In the first step, but I know we are not in first step. So the capital stock should be include both the investment and the depreciation sort of thing. You work it out. So including the current FDI.
Correct.
And then you have another FDI coming in the right hand side, kind of. So the FDI come into the model twice. So that's my question. First one. The second one is like I think Fu already discussed this, but the whole idea of PCI is to attract more FDI, See, so you ask, even though I'm not sure that you are
I don't
totally independent.
I try to have a look to the different components.
Okay.
But when you are the best in one component, you are the best in all the other. So it's very difficult to say something. I have another paper where I take Papi, or Papi is mean, and what also Papi in French. But where you have different value, different component, and you can understand more easily the component than Papi than PCI. PCI, I was surprised because when you are the best in one domain, you are the best in the other. So you cannot enter into the detail. But maybe after the remark of Fu, I will have a look to the different component of PCI.
And
with respect to
technically speaking, the methodology of the PCI change every 5 years. So you need to take into account that.
I think
The only thing is that because of the performance of the leadership kind of sort of, they try to compete with each other, so the score become very squeezed.
Yeah,
Right, it's very close.
Yeah.
So it's not meaningful to use either rank or the score itself. And every next 5 years they have to change it to make the score bigger.
That's the problem of data in Vietnam. So we have done the best what we have.
I don't know. I'm not.
No, you cannot be far more than that.
I'm not that.
But what must be consistent with the change of data is that when you see your PCI increasing due to the fact that you have a change in the way of conducting FDI, to have all the population moving in the same way. If you have all the population moving in the same way, every time we are looking to one, we are looking to all in the neighborhood. The same. Was the same. But maybe I have to check. This is important. And I saw this issue in one of maybe nobody saw, I think, but one of the figures, you can see very well that.
So you just hide it.
No, I say nothing about that. I was honest.
How about the assumption of independent is the meeting vote? This is the meeting unit.
But are independent?
Yeah, are they really independent? No, okay, look to the next. No, right?
This is
Yeah, the leadership of the OECD have looked at the term and what is that guy doing? So it's not actually independent.
yes, this is the issue also noticed by
Okay. Thank you. Anyway, any other questions?
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to hear something.
Yeah,
Now?
okay.
Okay, thank you, Michel.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Bonjour, Michel.